So if you're following my tweets, or you would have seen on announcements, we had a bit of water damage in the office. So what happened is the architects that kind of are across the hallway from us, there's an air conditioning pipe that ran through their ceiling, and they were doing some air conditioning maintenance on Friday, and they must have over tightened this cap that goes on a part of the pipe, and it had rusted, and the over tightening had kind of made it snap. So, and there's 20 stories of like floors above that goes to the air conditioning tower that feeds down to this thing. So the moment it popped off, a ton of water just sprayed out. So the fire brigade spotted the water coming out of the building. They called the building manager, they called the architect. About 3 hours later, he managed to make his way in and shut off the water. We had the big cleanup after that. Our office, it wasn't totally covered. Fortunately, the floor is not quite level. The entryway had probably about 1 or 2 centimeters of water, the meeting room as well, and the kitchen. But the main work area actually wasn't too bad. There's a little bit of water, but it was all right. Unfortunately, the concrete kind of absorbed a lot of the water too, so it's taking a while for it to come up. We've had the cleaning crew sort of coming in each day and doing it, and we've got a lot of blowers that are kind of blowing air over it, trying to kind of air it out. We've got the air conditioner running as well, so hopefully we'll get it dried up soon and everyone can come back in. I just want to bring a lot of people in to try and work from here while the cleaners are kind of moving around doing a bunch of stuff, and the noise of these blowers are pretty noisy. So hopefully we'll be back up and running soon. This computer was in the meeting room. We had it sitting on the floor because it was being used for the Zoom calls that we do. When I picked this up, water started pouring out the bottom of it. So I'm not sure exactly what state it's in. I might try plugging it in later today, see what happens. Anyway, so that's that. So what I want to talk about today is not so much that, actually, it's the new Octopus demo site that we've been working on. So you're probably familiar, we have a public demo server, demo.octopus.com. This is an Octopus server. People can sign in as a guest and have a look at how Octopus works. But it's something we set up quite a while ago. Everyone has had access to it. We've been using it for a long time. Every time we do a new release, we're going in and manually upgrading it so we can actually see what the experience for upgrading is going to be like for our customers, do a bit of smoke testing, that kind of stuff. But because everyone had access to it, people would kind of use it as kind of a little scratch area for just setting up stuff for blog posts or documentation or whatever. So there was a lot of rubbish in there. When you're signed in, you can configure your dashboard to exclude projects that are kind of rubbish. But when you sign in as a guest, you can't. So you kind of see all of that stuff. And even within the things like OctoFX that were fairly pristine, you go into there and there'd be some silly variables or some PowerShell scripts that just exit 42 or something like that. So we wanted to clean that up for a while because I haven't felt too comfortable sort of pointing a lot of people to it. We're doing this new homepage, which I'll show you in a minute, and we needed some nice screenshots for it, some sort of realistic looking screenshots. So we wanted to update the demo site for that. And Gartner are doing their review of application release automation again. And so we need to be able to do a demo for them as well. And we weren't sure exactly what they would be interested in. So it was a good kind of excuse to spend a day and just kind of rebuild demo. So the first step was locking everyone out. So if you're using mRemote now, if you try and connect to the demo server, you won't have the right password for it, and I'm not giving it to you. So if you want to test new Octopus releases, do it on Deploy 3 or some other server. If Deploy 3 needs more data, we can just set up some scheduled builds or something to sort of do a lot of deployments from it. Using demo is not the right way. So Team Commercial will take care of demo from now on, and we'll upgrade it and try and keep it up to date and everything. You also can't log into the Octopus server anymore, either like through the web console. So we only have one user who has a password. And yeah, so the next step was then to make OctoFX look a bit more realistic. So previously the OctoFX sample project had a rolling deployment, but it was just using like a bit of PowerShell and a sleep to kind of pretend it was taking something out of a load balancer. What I did this time is actually set up instances on EC2 to run this web application that we're deploying. And it uses a real load balancer and is actually switching them out in the production part of the deployment. The dev and test just go to a single machine. So I'll walk you through that and all the things it shows off. The next part was to create a new project to demo multi-tenancy, because multi-tenancy is something when I'm doing sort of customer pre-sales demos, multi-tenancy comes up a lot, and it's kind of a real selling point for Octopus at this point. But we never had really a great demo experience for it. So that's what this is. So this is a Node.js project being deployed to an Ubuntu server. Then once that was all in place, we did the Gartner demo, and then Andrew and I spent the day in the office taking lots of screenshots and editing them for the new homepage. So we had all the content written up a week ago, and we've been working through the screenshots for it all now to try and make it look nice. So it's not just the new homepage, there's a ton of small pages underneath it. So we've taken 91 screenshots that we've been editing and uploading. So actually, I'll walk you through the demo, and then I'll come back to some of these things. So this is the new demo server. There's two projects, OctoFX and the Phoenix project, because every company has an internal project called Phoenix. If we look at the OctoFX one, so there's a TeamCity server behind this that's doing a new build every hour or so and deploying it to the dev and test environments. And then if we're doing a demo to someone, we can come in and deploy it to production. The deployment process has been updated. So there's an approval step that's production only. We then deploy the schema changes with DB up. We deploy a Windows service. And then we do a rolling deployment for an ASP.NET website. We also test internally that the website we just deployed works locally before we go and add it back to the Elastic Load Balancer. These steps were from the community library, both the ELB ones and the URL testing ones, and they worked beautifully. The test URL one, my first deployment failed because I thought I'll show you actually. This is quite cool. So you tell it the URL you want to check, and what's nice is you can tell it like, here's where the machine is that I want to connect to, but here's the host header to send, so that instead of trying to, because in this case we want to test the machine before it goes back in the load balancer, but we want to send the right host name to actually make sure we've configured the bindings properly. So that's pretty cool. And then I thought that this would be like a partial match, but it's not. It's the entire content. So I guess it probably works nice if you just got like a status thing that just returns okay or something like that as some text. But I didn't. I just had a page I was checking for. So maybe we could actually, I might make a change to that community template just to make that optional or something, partial match or not. So that's quite a cool step. And then if that passes, we're adding it back to the Elastic Load Balancer. And this was actually, I enjoyed this. This was my first time using the IAM stuff in AWS. Took a little bit to get the policy right to be able to just work with that load balancer and nothing else. But that was my own not understanding Azure, not understanding AWS all that well. And then we use one step template. We use a step template that just prints a message just to kind of show step templates a little bit. This also uses certificates. So the app that this is actually deploying is live. So if we go to dev.octofx.com, you can see it is deployed here. It's also available on HTTPS. And these are real certificates that we bought and everything. But what's cool is those certificates are also being deployed from Octopus using the new certificates feature. So in the bindings, we say to use this certificate. And if I jump over to variables, you can see we've got those certificates configured. One thing I tried to do is put a lot more variables in here for different stuff. So here you can see the certificates. You can see the host names that we're using for our bindings. We've got all the stuff building up the database and everything, and then the AWS things. And we tried to do a few things like to connect to the database, we're just using SQL authentication, which I know is a bit of a no-no, but in this demo environment, there's no AD server and the SQL is on a separate box. So it was just the easiest thing that could work. And it's not exposed to the internet anyway. And so in this case, we've got one user that's used for both the dev and test environment. So kind of showing people some of the different things you can do around scoping. So that's OctoFX, kind of an extension of what was already there. The new project is Phoenix. So this is a multi-tenancy demo. We've got 4 tenants, and I'll jump over here to show you. We've got 4 tenants set up. We're using tag sets. So one is to say what type of hosting that these companies are paying for. And one is the upgrade ring. So we can show people, when you do a deployment, you can say deploy to all tenants that have this tag and show people how we deal with them in bulk. The process for this is we have a Node.js app, which I'll just launch in the background because I'd like to show something. That app is packaged up as part of a TeamCity build, it's just zipped up and gets pushed up to Octopus with the TeamCity build step. And then we've got 2 script steps that run. So one is to configure the Node app to run as under PM2, which is a process monitor. It just keeps the thing running in case it crashes. And then the next part is because these are all running on one server, each one runs as a different port, but we just want it online or on port 80. There's Nginx in front of that I don't know how you pronounce that actually. I think it's Nginx. To kind of do the reverse proxying back to the Node app. So this is the Node app. It's just a simple Express app. It doesn't do a whole lot. Reads some variables, some environment variables out. So what PM2 will do is when you start this thing up, it will capture all of the environment variables that were in your console session when you told PM2 to start running an app and monitoring it. And then even if like the box restarts or you stop the process for some reason and restart it, it will keep those old environment variables that it captured on startup. So this is that kind of 12-factor thing you might have read. I'll send the link around for that if you're interested. But the idea is apps shouldn't kind of depend too much on getting configuration from other places, and environment variables are a good way to get them, except passwords. I don't think anyone's got a nice solution for passwords and stuff, but that's outside our scope anyway. So one of the, there's a bunch of variables here as well. So this is kind of one of the things, I'll talk about the things that kind of worked well and then some of the things that didn't work so well. But the OctoFX one, I sort of set it up and I think the first deployment failed and then like the second and third succeeded. So it was pretty easy. It's using all the built-in steps and some from the library. The only issue I had was around authenticating with the AWS IAM user that I set up. I didn't have the policy right. With this one, it kind of took about 17 attempts to get this thing to actually work the way I wanted to. So some things that worked really well. Firstly, actually signing into our AWS account is really nice, and just everything feels so much more organized and tagged nicely in there. So well done to Team Infrastructure for that. The multi-tenancy stuff is brilliant. Actually setting up a multi-tenant deployment is really easy. It was the Linux SSH PM2 stuff that kind of caused those 17 attempts. Multi-tenancy was actually really nice. And SSH deployments in general worked really well. So some things that weren't so great. It would be nice to have better AWS support. So instead of having those access keys and stuff as variables, it would be cool to have them as account objects in Octopus. But I know that's on our roadmap. In our library, so you can search in our library for, if you're kind of in the .NET universe, and there's usually like a step template or something that someone's made, but there isn't. So I thought like Nginx, I thought I'll search the library and surely there'll be something there, but there wasn't. And same for PM2. So then my next thought was, well, I'm going to go and make a step template to do the PM2 stuff, but that was actually really hard. I haven't figured out how to do it, and I'll show you why in a minute. So we'll come back to this part. Our docs were really good in the sense that if I searched either on Google or the search thing, I could find what I was looking for. But they were kind of, I guess, a little bit annoying from a structure point of view. So I'll give you an example. So we're using certificates for the website, and I wanted to know I know that we sort of expose some variables for each certificate, like the thumbprint that you can access from PowerShell. So if we look for Octopus deploy certificates, and we end up here on the certificates page, and there's a whole bunch of pages under here about, I'll zoom in, you can read that. And there's a whole bunch of pages here about dealing with certificates, but nothing about the variables part. which I just kind of naturally expected to be there. And so then I had to go back and search for variables. And it turns out they're in what's also probably a pretty logical place under the variables section. So specific variables. So there's nothing wrong, I guess, with this, in the sense that I guess it just would have been nicer to be able to find it somehow. And I think it kind of shows taking some time to just think about the structure of our documentation, or having someone that can really focus on that would be quite helpful. This wasn't the only one. There are a few other situations like that. So in my case, I've got this multi-tenant app. I'm using this as like, I want to get some consulting expertise from the people at Octopus. So maybe I should do this as a support request. So in my case, I've got these variables, and I set them up using variable templates. So what's really cool is you go into these tenants, and we look at Intel, and we go to their variables. Oops, wrong one. We go to variables, and then we go to project variables. And these are all set here. So during the demo to Gartner, I had their logo uploaded somewhere, and I created a tenant for them on the fly, pasted in the details, gave them a host name and a port number, deployed it, and the website was available for them. That's really cool. So this all works really well. Each of these is getting passed into the Node app. So like I said, it's going to read them out of environment variables. So like the logo gets read from this environment variable. So basically, I've got to get this logo image from here, which is a tenant variable, into my Node JS app's environment variables. So jumping back to the project, but one of the annoying things were back here on the dashboard, you can see I'm doing some untenanted deployment. So I've got a dev environment where I'm deving stuff, and I don't have any tenants here. And I've got a test environment, which is also untenanted, except for BMW, who want their own particular test environment. So what I wanted was a way to say, I want to use this logo for when I do dev deployments, and then I want to use my tenant specific logos when I do their deployments. To get that to work was kind of annoying. So what I had to do was set up like a conditional variable that checked if the tenant's name was defined. And if it was, it returned true. Otherwise, it returned nothing. And then around all these things, so like, what host name does it listen on, or what port, I kind of have to read it from either the one that comes from the variable template for each tenant, or my fallback one, which is defined down here, kind of based on that value. And like making that work probably took me about 5 or 6 deployments. So I don't know,
Paul,
do around that.
Just to jump in, sorry. Did the default variables on the project variable templates not work as you expected? Did they have a strange behavior or something? Or
I don't know.
or were they?
Is that the way? But how would you do that, like different per environment?
Like a different default value per environment.
Yeah.
If you gave them a variable pattern, then in theory, when it gets sort of rehydrated from here, it would suck that out, I suppose.
I'll try that. I'll try that. That wasn't, I think I just found with this, it wasn't kind of intuitive, and I wasn't even sure what to search for to make that work. The other part that was then really hard is, so I've got all these variables now, and they're all correct, and I've got to get them into this PM2's environment variables thing. So back here, so I've got a script step. What I really wanted was to make this a step template, but in order for this to work, I have to kind of load all these Octopus variables as environment variables inside my bash script. And I guess this is the part that kind of prevents me from being able to make this a nice step template and put it in the library, because I can't kind of figure out a nice way to kind of define a step template that can then read a bunch of environment variables and kind of load them into the session. So something that might be kind of nice. The other annoying thing about this actually too is, with a PowerShell script, you've got a dictionary that has all the variables loaded in it, and you can iterate over them and go and find things that match a pattern or something, and then I could do stuff with them. So it would be nice to just say, go and find all variables that start with Phoenix. With this, you don't seem to be able to do that. So if you call this and a variable doesn't exist, it throws an error. So that was a bit problematic too. Because
I just,
where I'm dealing with PM2, that works pretty easily, and that could be a step template, but it's just kind of figuring out how to expose them to the same bash session. I can't figure out how to do.
if you drop that into your .bashrc file, the next SSH session to that box will load them.
That seems very hacky.
That's how that it works in the bash land. It's the equivalent of doing a system level or even a user level persistent environment variable.
But that's going to break, right? If I do then 2 deployments concurrently to the same machine, like one step can run, it can set some variables, another step can set some different variables. Then the first deployment's kind of second script runs, it's going to get the wrong set.
So we've got a similar concept on the Docker side of
yeah.
things. We've got a similar concept on the Docker side of things, but in that case, the user needs to explicitly basically set the variables that they want to be passed in. So you build up kind of a list of variables that get kind of this sort of process that takes place. Like you say, Bash, the version of Bash that we support, I think it's 3 or whatever, doesn't have support for dictionaries, whereas I think Bash 4, there is dictionaries as a native sort of structure. Yeah. And that would have given us, so, I mean, if we upgrade our requirements, that'll at least get us that.
I think if we had a setting in here, like for a script step where you can actually like click a thing and say, I want to select all my variables that I want exposed as environment variables. So if you think about like how TeamCity do it, when you define parameters in TeamCity, over here. So when you add a parameter, you choose sort of what kind it is. So configuration parameter is only available within TeamCity. You can reference it from steps and things, but it's not sent down to your scripts. You can do it as a system property. I can't remember what the difference between those is. And then environment variables will automatically, for any script that gets invoked from this project, they get passed down as environment variables to the thing. So I feel like, and that's probably like a really natural way for people to do bash scripts and stuff like that, by kind of expecting some environment variables to be set up by whatever called it. So I don't know. I don't want to get lost in the weeds because this is a TLDR, but if you've got some thoughts about any of that, let's sync up after. I'd like to make this experience much easier. I'd like to be able to make a PM2 step in our library that people can use to do this kind of stuff, but these variables just really got in the way for that. Oh, and the last little thing is we've got some controls for multi-tenancy around saying that, you know, like a particular machine participates in tenanted deployments or untenanted deployments. And I think there's some checkboxes and stuff for it. You can't seem to do it on a per environment basis. So in my case, like thinking logically, it makes sense to have a shared dev environment and a shared test environment, but my app is a multi-tenant app. It doesn't make sense to have a shared production environment. And yet I can go here and deploy this to production. There's nothing kind of stopping me from doing that. And the only idea we could come up with that would prevent it is to kind of do a whole bunch of role customizations to sort of prevent that, but I don't think it's sort of the right way. So it might be worth us kind of just reconsidering some of those checkboxes around this kind of filter of like where it makes sense to deploy or not.
So we do have a setting on the project level, which is a little less granular than what you're describing, I suppose. But on the project level, you can say this project is only available for tenants or not tenants, etc.
That's right. I feel like we just got the granularity of this wrong. Like I think it probably needs to be.
So
like
the way we've sort of suggested in the past is to create kind of a test tenant then that is not scoped to production or whatever, but perhaps we need to make this down to the environment level. I suppose, it's a balance between this or making it too granular and too many sort of knobs and dials.
My understanding, speaking to Mike about this, was that the ability to deploy a project both tenanted and untenanted was designed as a bridge to get people from into multi-tenancy. But I've heard him say that if he could start again from scratch, probably wouldn't allow projects to be both tenanted and multi-tenanted.
So the approach would be then you have a fake tenant called
Correct.
Donovan Dev.
So that's And that's kind of the way we recommend at the moment. If you want to have kind of a fully control, like the full granular control on your project, then treat them all as tenants.
Cool. That's good. Is best support responses ever. So I haven't shown you the new homepage. So let me show you this. So I think I showed this a few weeks ago when I was still baking it. This is almost ready. It will probably go out today. So this uses all the screenshots from what we built in this demo environment. So you can see it's hopefully starting to look a bit more realistic. So we have like a main homepage, and then we have all of these things, and each one has its own pages with screenshots that kind of talk about that feature. So this is the one for .NET applications, talks about all the things we can do there. And then we try to think for each of those what other things you might be interested in. So if you're a .NET dev, you probably want to know something about what we do for Azure. This is the one that I haven't got screenshots for yet, because we're going to work on another demo project for Azure and then take some screenshots from it. But everything else has a bunch of screenshots now that go along with all of these things. If we look at like multi-tenancy, you can see that's now using the ones from that project that we set up. So that's been really cool. So like I said, this is probably going to go out today. We have a couple more screenshots to upload, and that's basically it. So I'll send the link out, and if you could all just have a bit of a look through and just look for anything that kind of looks unfinished or doesn't make sense, like in terms of content or screenshots that are with them, or any kind of really important things that we missed that we should be talking about on our landing pages, let me know. Cool. So we're going to work on a demo for Azure, because one of the key selling points, if you're doing stuff on Azure, if you're making an Azure website, you can just throw your code in GitHub and have it automatically build the website every time you make a change. And if you're doing Azure Functions, you can do the same thing. But once you've got an app that's kind of got some stuff running on VMs, an Azure website, a bunch of functions, suddenly like rolling out your deployment isn't just checking some code into GitHub. It's like, or you've got to kind of check the code in all the right order, or merge all the right branches on all the right repositories in the right order to hopefully get this thing to deploy properly. So Octopus has a really valuable role to play there in just helping you tame deployments that consist of 5 or 6 different Azure things, or a combination of Azure and AWS things. So we're going to put a demo together to kind of demonstrate all of that stuff, like deploying a resource group, deploying a service fabric thing, deploying some stuff to VMs. And then since the Java stuff is looking pretty baked, hopefully soon we'll do another demo project for deploying the Java app. And then we'll record a bunch of videos for each of these landing pages. So when you come here to multi-tenancy, instead of clicking to go and read the docs about it, it'll be to watch a video where we'll walk you through a multi-tenant deployment using those demo projects. Cool, that's it from me.